All right, you're not going to believe this one. Donald Trump, the president who basically built his entire economic platform on tariffs, is suddenly cutting them. I know, right? So what on earth could make the tariff man himself do a complete 180 on his signature policy? Well, the answer is probably sitting in your fridge.
So here's what we're going to break down. First, we'll look at the big reversal itself, then we'll get into the real problem here, food inflation. After that, we'll cover the political pressure cooker that was building up, how these tariff cuts are actually supposed to work, and finally, what all of this could mean for a country like India.
Okay, so let's start with the reversal. To really get why this is such a jaw-dropping move, you have to remember just how fundamental tariffs were to the Trump administration's whole way of thinking about the economy.
The logic, at least at the beginning, was pretty simple, right? It was this idea of, hey, other countries are hitting us with tariffs, so we should hit them right back. The argument was always that this would protect American businesses and, rake in billions for the government. It was their whole economic brand.
But now, the reality has completely flipped. The administration just announced they're rolling back tariffs on over 200 food products. And we're not talking about a little tweak here and there. This is a major U-turn on a whole bunch of stuff. And this is stuff a lot of us buy all the time. I mean, we're talking about beef, ground coffee, tea, cocoa, even things like bananas, orange juice, and all kinds of spices. The whole idea is to try and make these everyday items cheaper. So you gotta ask, what got so bad that they had to make a move like this?
Well, that brings us to the core issue. Food inflation was just getting out of control. The pain people were feeling at the grocery store got so bad, it became impossible for the administration to just ignore it anymore.
I mean, just look at ground beef, a 13% price hike. That's not something you might notice. That's something you definitely feel every single week.
And for things like steaks, it was even worse, up 17%. These are serious hits to a family's budget, not just small changes.
And it wasn't just meat either. Even a basic, cheap item like bananas shot up 7%. That's when you know the problem is everywhere in the grocery store.
So when you look at the big picture, food inflation went over 3%. Now, I know what you're thinking. 3% doesn't sound that crazy. But for an economy like the US, the target is under 2%. When you go over that, it means prices are going up faster than a lot of people's paychecks, and that creates a ton of stress.
And this whole situation just perfectly highlights the big debate we've been hearing for years. The administration kept saying tariffs were money that other countries paid to the US government. But economists were saying, no. A tariff is just a tax that your own people end up paying through higher prices. Well, with inflation this high, it's pretty clear who was right.
Which leads us right into our next point. Because when people feel that kind of economic pain in their wallets, it doesn't take long for it to become major political pain for whoever's in charge.
And the administration got a huge wake-up call. They saw some pretty bad election losses in places like Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City. And when you looked at why people voted the way they did, a top reason was the rising cost of living. So they had to act, and they had to act fast. They used an executive order to do it, which let them bypass Congress entirely. That just shows you how urgent they thought this problem was.
Of course, their political opponents saw an opening and took it. The argument from critics was pretty straightforward. See, the administration is finally admitting that their trade war is what's making things more expensive for regular people. That kind of attack really puts the White House on its back foot.
And that's really the bottom line here. For years, the official line was that tariffs weren't hurting consumers. This reversal is basically an unspoken admission that, yeah, actually, they are a big part of the problem. That's a massive, massive shift in strategy.
So they did this big U-turn. But how does cutting a tariff actually lead to lower prices for you? Let's walk through the intended chain of events, from the policy change all the way to your pocket.
Think of it like a simple three-step chain reaction. First, getting rid of the tariff makes it cheaper for companies to import food into the country. Step 2, since their costs are lower, those importers can now sell those goods to grocery stores for less. And finally, Step 3, the grocery stores can then, hopefully, pass those savings on to you at the checkout counter. But, and this is a really, really important but, there's absolutely no guarantee this will work perfectly. A tariff is just one part of a product's final price. You've still got the cost of fuel, labor, and transportation, and all of those things are still high. So while this should help, it's not some magic wand that will fix everything overnight.
All right, for our last section, let's zoom out. When the biggest economy in the world makes a major policy change like this, it sends ripples all over the globe. So what could this mean for a major trading partner like India?
Well, on the surface, the direct impact on India seems pretty small. India isn't really a huge supplier of the specific foods that got the tariff cut. We're talking beef, bananas, cocoa. Most of those imports come from other places, like Latin America.
But it gets more complicated when you dig deeper. On one hand, there's a risk. If the U.S. starts giving better deals to Latin American countries, it could make it harder for Indian exports like spices to compete. But on the other hand, there's a massive opportunity here. This move proves the Trump administration is willing to be flexible, so India can use this moment as leverage to negotiate better deals for its own really important exports, like textiles, pharmaceuticals, and IT services.
So I guess that leaves us with the big $64,000 question. Is this tariff rollback just a short-term patch to deal with an immediate political headache over food prices? Or are we seeing a real, fundamental change in the Trump administration's entire philosophy on trade? Only time will tell.